Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Empty Cloud for our weekly monk chat on Friday night. And I'm joined here by two venerables, Venerable Ajahn Wade Buripanyo and Venerable Bhante Jayasara. So if you have any questions for us, feel free to leave them in the comments, and I'll be distributing the questions among the venerables.
I have a suggestion to see if we want to. I know Bhante Siddhasa usually kind of does a revolving thing with the questions, but I was thinking maybe unless it gets way too overwhelming, maybe we just do a thing where whoever kind of wants to answer it first answers, and then if any of the other monastics wants to add anything, they can do that.
Sure. Yeah.
Sure. So okay. This way people can get the different perspectives. Yeah. And sure. If we have like 40 minutes left and there's 80,000 questions, maybe we'll go back to it.
We can always do Zen answers.
Yeah.
Sometimes we do Zen. Yeah. Zen style. And we'll say greetings to Alyssa, Victor, Lydia, Norma, Kim, Geeta, Manal, Christina, Luisa, and hello, Mary. Mary said she'd be joining when she was here at the monastery earlier.
Oh.
Looks like Diane, Jerry, Amy, Wasabi, Jayanta, and Maria. Hello to everybody. And we don't have any questions.
You know what Bhante Siddhasa says.
This might be the shortest monk chat in history.
We do a yogi also. Yeah. Karuna is here. We could ask if Karuna has any questions.
Yes. We have a quasi question.
We do have a sort of question from Lydia. It says, what is Zen style answer? What I was referring to is actually when Ayasui Jana was here, I think we did this. It's when there's tons of questions in the chat and someone asks a question, it's like a Zen master. So basically a very short fire, kind of rapid fire answer.
That probably leads to more questions.
Yeah.
But you have to figure it out yourself.
Bhumika. We have 30 people watching, but
perhaps we can maybe we stimulate some questions. We recap. We had a couple of sutta studies recently. Bhante Jay did sutta studies for us on the topics of both on the topic of community harmony. Two different angles on it. One, the story of Kosambi this morning, the quarrel at Kosambi, and how three kind of advanced monks lived together very harmoniously. And the Buddha got them to talk about how they were able to live together harmoniously, and then I wonder, Bhante Jay, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but I wonder if you summarize a little bit the sutta study you did on Wednesday. Several different aspects of how to avoid disharmony in the community, and avoid the extremes, as I recall, of seeking sensual pleasures and self-mortification.
Well, unfortunately, Ajahn, I would go into it, but it seems like we had a bunch of rapid fire questions coming.
Maybe that will. I'm sorry.
Yeah, if there's an emptiness shortly, I'll talk about that.
Great. Well, we have our first point. It looks like from Christina, who asks, "How does sense restraint work with the practice?"
All right, so I'll start. So sense restraint is done for a couple different reasons. One of the major reasons is that we are trying to see things as they are. We're trying to understand things, and we're trying to act in a skillful way. If we are unrestrained in senses, we're not paying attention. We're just allowing them, the senses to kind of rule us. We're allowing things to work on autopilot. And when we do that, we don't gain much wisdom and insight in that. Like we're not paying attention. So sense restraint is actually a very good practice to be able to see, have time to see something, right? Instead of a desire arises and your senses just go get wrapped up in the desires. Now you have sense restraint and you can see just a little bit. You can see, oh, there's a beautiful sight, or a nice smell, or whatever, right? That's kind of, you can notice that enticement, but you can be restrained and you can investigate all of the aspects of mind that go in between the enticement, the noticing of the situation, the enticement, and then the acting in on it. So it allows you, it's a training in this regard to help with patient endurance and being able to see things as they are.
Yes, is this a monastic or a layperson asking this question?
Layperson, I assume.
Layperson.
Yeah. Did you have anything to add, Ajahn?
Maybe dovetailing with what Bhante J was saying is that the kilesas usually, quite commonly are born in relation to our sensory experience. So we hear something, or we see something, or we smell something, we feel something that is either pleasant or unpleasant, and as we experience it, and then it gives rise to desire or aversion. And if we allow ourselves just to go along with this, then we attend to the sensory experience in a way that strengthens this defilement. I used the term kilesa before, which is a Pali word for defilement. It's which we call dirt in the mind. Greed or aversion, delusion being the third kind of defilement. And so we can find ourselves in a cycle of wanting something or wanting to get away from something. If we just allow the mind to get involved with the sensory experience and go along with it, and that depends on delusion. But if we can activate our mindfulness, if we can be alert to this process, activate our mindfulness, then the desire, the aversion has to abate. And then we experience a clarity in the heart and an ease in the heart with relation to our sensory experience. And then we can make a more skillful decision about what to do with regard to our sensory experience, something that we like to hear or something we don't like to smell, or whatever it may be. We can make a wise decision about what to do with it, instead of just being all caught up in it, caught up in the emotions, and then reacting to our sensory experience.
Thank you. And now we have one from, I assume, Diane, maybe. What advice can you give to very beginners, or someone who's a complete beginner to Buddhism?
Go in it knowing that it's hard. It's not easy. Don't get fooled by the advertisements of some peaceful looking person meditating on a beach. So it's not an easy practice. It's a hard practice. Don't give up. And also don't expect nor try to learn everything at once. It's going to take a long time of practice to kind of have everything be imbibed into you and for you to start to understand it. So listen to lots of Dhamma talks, read some books, read the suttas, and practice. And then, keep going. Don't give up.
Anything to add?
It's a big topic.
Go ahead. Yeah, we could talk all night about that.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Nobody else has. Okay.
That's great advice.
Okay. And Sud has a question. Dear Bhante, how does one practice Satipatthana in the 4 postures? Are you somehow doing this while in activity?
Well, maybe I'll take an initial response. So, Satipatthana meditation. If we talk about Satipatthana in regard to the suttas, and the Satipatthana Sutta of the Majjhima Nikaya, for example, or the Mahasatipatthana Sutta of the Digha Nikaya, is talking about the 4 domains that we should be attentive to in practicing mindfulness when we're on the Noble Eightfold Path to attaining enlightenment. There are some forms of Buddhist meditation that are not technically speaking within these 4 domains. For example, loving kindness meditation is just one that comes to mind. That is still uses our mindfulness and is still very skillful, but it doesn't technically fall within these boundaries, and so isn't quite technically on the Noble Eightfold Path. But the 4 domains of mindfulness are being aware of objects with relation to the body, in the here and now. Being aware of objects with relation to vedana, as it says in Pali, usually translated as feeling. It's the second one. The third one being objects related to being the mind itself, I should say, actually. The chitta, as it says in Pali, the chitta nupassana. And then the fourth one being dhammas. This is a topic this domain can be talked about quite at length. There's some controversy about what's really meant in it. But the first set of it listed in the suttas is about the hindrances and factors of enlightenment. So the kinds of emotions and the so on experienced in the heart, and distinguishing between what is skillful and what is unskillful, and being attentive to fostering skillful mental states. And so some of these, usually in the beginning of the practice, we want to focus on an object with relation to the body, if we say it that way. Kind of the grosser physical form is easier to be attentive to. So many of the kammatthana that we start practicing meditation with, like breath meditation, for example, or the movements of the body when we're practicing walking meditation, come from this domain. And then as we make the mind calm with these, then we can be more attentive to others, such as the physical sensations in the second domain, the mind and the emotions within us. And some of these are very conducive to practicing in multiple postures, such as the movements of the body. You can be noticing whether or not you're sitting, for example, or you can notice the sensations of the body as you're moving, for example. You notice the body as it's moving. The breath may be harder in different postures. And so, and another one from the body contemplations, like the 32 parts of the body, that noticing repulsive aspects of the body may be difficult also in some certain postures. And so we have to learn over time in practicing and in consultation probably with a teacher what seems appropriate at different times to practice.
Yeah, one thing I was going to add to this, kind of a perspective that's maybe I haven't heard it too much, but it's somewhat there, is that one way I've thought about the 4 Satipatthanas is kind of all 4 at once, where essentially, let's say we were talking about sense restraint. When you're going through your day, you have general awareness of your body, like Ajahn was mentioning. Maybe you're aware of your posture, you're aware of what you're doing. So if you're extending your limbs, like moving your arms, or even if you're speaking or being silent or whatever you're doing with your body, developing mindfulness of that. But what I've kind of reflected on is when you're doing that, there's also sensations arising at the same time, both physical and mental sensations. So maybe while you're doing some activity and you're hearing someone speaking, maybe it's unpleasant, like the voice or the noise is disturbing you, or maybe you see something and it's unpleasant. So you're aware of your body seeing, and you're also aware of the sensations that are arising. And then you just notice how is my mind reacting to this? So is my mind greedy? Is my mind aversive? Is my mind very constricted, or is my mind more expansive and open and receptive? And so you're aware of your body, you're aware of the sensations, and you're watching your mind states. And then you're discerning, okay, what am I doing that's contributing to skillful qualities, and what am I doing that's contributing to unskillful or unwholesome qualities that's affecting and shaping my mind in relation to this experience? And this might sound a little bit complicated because there's all these things going on at once. But I think if you integrate it, you start to practice like this while you go through your day, just starting, like Ajahn was saying, with the body, and then developing, noticing, especially if you're practicing a little bit of sense restraint, noticing what sensations are happening. Are you experiencing pleasant things or unpleasant things? And watching how the mind's reacting to that. And then you just start to train, okay, when I focus on these types of things, skillful qualities grow, wholesome qualities grow. When I focus on these types of things, unskillful, unwholesome qualities grow. And so then while you're going throughout your day, no matter what your body's doing, no matter what sensation you're experiencing, no matter what mind state you're in, and no matter what kind of skillful and unskillful qualities are being developed in you, you can still be attentive to that all kind of at once. And then maybe when you do very focused sitting practice or focused walking practice, hopefully you've already developed the mind to be mindful, to be aware, to be leaning towards skillful qualities, and it should contribute to that more focused practice. Do you have anything, Bante?
No? Well, I've covered well.
Okay.
So we'll move on. Yeah.
Luisa says, by any chance, do you know if the book, The Connected Discourse of the Buddha, translated by Bhikkhu Bodhi, is all of the suttas?
I assume you mean all the suttas, like as in if you were to look in the Pali in the Samyutta Nikaya. Well, I don't know. I think maybe some clarification. But what I will say is, like in the Samyutta Nikaya and the Anguttara Nikaya, there's a ton of really, really small suttas, and different translators handle that in different ways. Even on my own the Maggaseka Discord that we've been reading through the suttas, and we jump between like Bhikkhu Bodhi translation and Bhante Sujato translation, and we've noticed that some things are not there between the two translations, etc. But basically everything is there. The Bhikkhu Bodhi translation or the Bhante Sujato translation on Sutta Central, you're going to get all the major suttas. There might be just some ellipsing or combining and things like that, but it's all there as far as I can tell.
Right. And Norma has a question. What is your favorite order for a typical 40-minute meditation?
Which one was?
Well, anyone. But I'll just answer briefly. What I would say is, I personally, if I usually do a 40-minute meditation, I wouldn't have an order of meditation subjects. I would try to choose one. Like I'm going to do mindfulness of breathing, or I'm going to do metta meditation. And then maybe if it was really going wrong and if it was really not working at that time, I might switch. But I usually don't have an order of subjects, if that's what's meant for myself personally. I don't know about the other venerables. Does that seem like it covers the question? I don't know if that's
it depends on what you mean by meditation. Right, it depends, and it also, so you're setting aside a period of time. Is it just sitting? Is it also sitting and walking? Are you adding metta in there? There's a huge variety of possibilities in there. So I guess what your favorite order is. I don't do it this way anymore, but for many years at Bhavana, when I would do an hour, when we would like be in the meditation hall, I would break it up I would first start doing walking meditation, then I do mindfulness of death meditation, then metta, and then I would finish it off with a half hour of sitting. And if my mind wanted to sit more, then I would adjust what I was doing.
Okay. And Diane says, what do you think of the early Buddhist text approach? Or is it better to follow the full Theravada tradition?
So I would say that depends on your proclivities and what calls to you. Right? The early Buddhist text approach, or the sutta approach, is something that for me personally was like the end of the journey, like trying to find where my real home was. And that's where my home was. And but for some people, they like things like Abhidhamma, they like the Visuddhimagga, and all the different things that are very important in the Theravada tradition. So what I would say is that's kind of up to you and your own path. Just because I or Bhante Sudaso or somebody here or a Bhavana society or where they teach just the early Buddhist texts or the suttas would teach that and kind of come from that approach doesn't necessarily mean that that's the best for you. So you have to figure it out and see what works best for you.
Okay. Did you have anything to add to that, Ajahn? No? Okay. Question about, I assume this is Paticca Samuppada, P.S. Number one, the cause of number two, or is it just that for there to be number two, you need to have one as a prerequisite?
What was it?
Well, so so they're asking is the previous condition in Paticca the 12 links of dependent origination, is it a cause or is it just a necessary condition? What I might say, just to start off here, is that traditionally it's considered extremely complex. Like the Theravada Abhidhamma has 24 types of conditions that they kind of apply to everything. And so usually it's not just one. It's like the most basic principle, paticca means depending on, and samuppada means arising. And the basic idea is like, if there were no ignorance, there would be no sankharas. There would be no kind of intentional activities. And it's not specifically about causing. It's specifically about dependency. So like, if there were no ignorance, there would be no intentional activities. If there were no intentional activities, consciousness would not continue in samsara, ultimately speaking. And if there were no consciousness, then there would be no name and form, no mind and body developing. If there were no mind and body, there would be no six senses. So it's not like, for example, feeling doesn't cause craving. So Vedana paccaya tanha means feeling is the condition for craving. If you have feeling, it doesn't mean it causes craving. But it means that if it wasn't for that feeling, craving wouldn't arise. Or another way of saying it is craving is feeding off of, depending on the feeling being there. Now, but that isn't to say that there aren't causes involved. And like, for example, you could say, for example, that a craving or grasping, like upadana, it is the cause, in a sense, one way of speaking, for continued existence or for rebirth. So you could say like craving is a sufficient condition for rebirth because craving is enough to cause it. But causes, sometimes that word can be a little bit tricky because it's, if you say like, what was the cause for the storm? And there could be many, many, many different conditions that come together. So it's kind of hard to pin down one cause. And at the end of the day, a cause is also an inference. Because what you really are seeing is you see when this is there, there's a correlating thing. But the actual relationship between that is actually hidden to us. It's not something that is directly experienced. It's inferred. Causality is inferred. And so really it's talking about conditionality. But in a more conventional way of speaking, sometimes you could say cause. Like, for example, choices or intentional activities or volitional activities or however you translate sankhara, in a sense, they kind of cause consciousness to continue more than, for example, feeling causes craving. But ultimately, it's really about conditions, dependency. I don't know if the other...
In addition to this, I would say that it's kind of a bit of a trap to get so focused on the 12 steps, because even in the suttas, there's basically 3 or 4 different ways that the Buddha goes through these links, right? He'll start with consciousness, or he'll start with a different thing. And also, there's the Buddha throws a little wrench in there when basically the Buddha says, right, if you look at the 12 steps, consciousness comes before name and form. But then in the sutta, the Buddha says that consciousness and name and form come together. One cannot arise without the other. So then you have at least 2 of those arising essentially at the same time, right? So don't get too overly focused about the 12 steps and exactly this and exactly that, because there is a bit of variety and also, as Ayurveda, I think, kind of explained, it's much more complicated than 1 = 2 = 3.
Okay. So, Scott has a question. Is it the case for those with certain conditioning that our emotional state can change rapidly when engaging with another who may be afflicted? Okay, this is not useful if we want to be of assistance to this person. Please help. So, is this question clear to the other? Certain conditioning, emotional states rapidly change when engaging with another who may be afflicted. And they're wanting to be of assistance.
Yeah, so sometimes you want to help somebody, but their distress may be causing you to be distressed. For example, it sounds like maybe that's one meaning here. It's, I think one thing we could say also is that when writing in the questions, we can just write in casual everyday language. So be more direct for us to understand kind of what exactly you're trying to refer to. So that's one possible, I think, reading of the question. Maybe that if you're trying to help out a friend, for example, and they're in distress, and then of course you start feeling badly because they're in distress, and it can make it difficult for you to see clearly how to help them, I guess. And so that's for each of us to have to pay attention to in the present when we're trying to be helpful to people, and if we have a good practice already, like a good meditation practice, and we keep precepts and so on, then it can help us going into a situation like this to see more clearly what to do and to be able to assert our mindfulness. Sometimes we have to simply say, well, this is the way it is, and maybe I'm not in the best position to help somebody, help this particular person, and is there somebody else who could be helpful to them, or even be equanimous about it, saying, well, this is the way the karma has worked out, and we're all the owners of our own karma. And so, well, sometimes we have loving kindness for others and compassion, and we want to act on that. We sometimes find that even if we're at our very best, and even the very best can't help everybody. And so they have to recognize that all beings are the owners of their karma, and so have to cultivate some equanimity. So there are a range of possible ways of looking at this. Yeah. But I think again, maybe I'd like to reiterate the having a practice, having a practice, an ongoing practice, keeping precepts and meditating, and slowly over time helps us to become more and more better equipped to deal with all the variety of things that life throws at us.
Thank you, Ajahn. Okay, Rick says, Bhantes, what Vinaya rules have been most helpful for your development on the path?
Which video was
Most helpful.
Well, I think I'm kind of chuckling to myself because I'm thinking about trying to parse it out to one or two or three various Vinaya rules. Because when we ordain as bhikkhus, of course, we undertake to follow them all. And so I've been following them all along. And, I think the celibate life is quite conducive to spiritual practice, in the effort to reduce and eliminate our kilesas, the defilements, such as greed. That if we don't feed the defilements, such as greed, by abstaining from certain behaviors. So, for example, abstaining from romantic relationships. This is actually very helpful. If we have a precept against, I wasn't so prone to using harsh speech or insulting people in lay life, but actually at times when I felt like calling somebody a so and so or something like this, if I got really angry and I remembered, I'm a monk and I'm not supposed to do that kind of thing. It made me work with my anger, and so we have a precept against insults is one that comes to mind, and so I had to work with my anger and let go of my anger, and this was very good. And so, we've been you've been a monk if you've been a monastic for several years, then at some point or other you seem to come across. I think you probably come across all of these rules, and you have to work with them and stay within bounds, And so I think they're all. I think over time we see the wisdom in all of them. And those of us who have been monastics for a while tend to grow in respect and esteem for all of the Vinaya rules.
Sadhu. Do you have anything to add, Bhante?
Yeah, no, that's good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Monal says, despite best intention to cultivate a meditation practice, I'm finding the mind even more resistant and stubborn. I will seek out visits to the monastery so I can be told to follow your meditation schedules. but will dodge the route of establishing sits in the convenience of my home. How can I help myself regarding this high resistance? So, having an at-home schedule.
This was again, she finds it easier to meditate. She finds it difficult to keep to a meditation schedule at home.
Yeah, so in the monastery it's easier, but she's having a resistance meditating on her own.
And, I found the same thing in lay life myself. When I was observing the religious observance day once a week, I found it extremely helpful. But I had to get out of my apartment, and so I would go to a meditation center, or even just out into the woods if the weather was good enough, and getting away from all the distractions at home. And then this helped me to stay to a good meditation schedule. This may not be as practical if you're trying to meditate for a half an hour at home each day or something like this. So if you have someplace you can go to, even if it means staying behind in the office for a little bit of time before going out of work, for example, or if you've got a special space at home, even for example, a corner of a room where you have an altar, you say, I'm going to go to this space at such and such time every day, and focus on that, and make it inviting. If you have an altar that has inviting, inspiring things on it, a Buddha image, for example, or photographs of teachers you admire, or your parents, for example, or if you have a lot of respect for and admiration for loving kindness, if you have a photograph that reminds you of loving kindness on your altar, for example, like a mother with a child, for example, or something like this. And if you have the lighting in such a way that it's inviting, and maybe some people like to have some meditation music and this kind of thing, make it something that's inviting and inspiring, and it's carefully planned out, and so that you it's inviting to meditate. Some ideas.
Okay. And here we have one. My question is, I started loving meditation recently. I was doing a lot of anapanasati and metta, but recently started to have this idea to also try some kasina, water element especially, as per the Visuddhimagga, as I love water somehow. Would it be okay to do all these meditations in conjunction as a layperson, or do you think I'm getting ahead of myself?
The only thing I would say is, at least from like Bhante Gunaratana and things like that, when it comes to Kasinas is something that you should be very careful doing on your own. That might be something especially important to have some kind of a teacher that can teach you that, because there are a few ways that can go bad. So I would definitely, normally I'm not too big on like you have to have a teacher to sit down and follow your breath and things like that. But when it comes to Kasina, I would suggest somebody who knows what they're doing to help you along with that.
That's interesting, actually, because that's kind of the, as I understand it, from what I've heard, that's the typical advice in the lineage of Ajahn Mun as well. Actually, so they don't teach Kasina meditation much, and they kind of handle it with caution. It's interesting that you say that.
I had actually gone to Bhante G probably like my first year or two there, and I was kind of having just kind of like a struggle with my basic sitting meditation, and I thought, you know what, I've tried all these other things, why don't I try Kasina? And I brought it up to him, and he was like, first he didn't have much good to say about it, and he told me, basically recommended that I don't even bother. But he did say that, it should be something that's guided by somebody who knows what they're doing. So,
Right.
But I don't see. This is the thing about in conjunction, right? There's, metta meditation and anapanasati. All these in conjunction is fine. The Kasina stuff adds a different element. That's all I would say.
Yeah, one thing I might say briefly is that you could even try like just body elements contemplation. So if you like water, you can contemplate, for example, the water elements, and that's not as intense as like deeply gazing or contemplating like a single element of water, but just contemplating like the fluids in the body or water externally and internally, and that can be a little bit more reflective and light. That's pretty common. If you really feel drawn to some kind of element practice, maybe that would be something you could look into. And we have a monastic, Bhante Varapanyo, here. Hello, Bhante. He says, blessings from southern Italy. Can you share a bit about the importance of generosity on the path, especially how it relates to stream entry, for example?
Did you say his name is Bhante Varapanyo?
Varapanyo.
Okay. It's Varapanyo's my name as well, so what a coincidence. Varapanyo. Okay.
Thoughts?
Let's see, would it be possible to ask? I'm curious about Bhante. Can you tell us a little bit about himself?
He is ordained in Burma.
Ordained in Burma.
Yeah.
Okay. So you know each other.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Great.
Yeah.
Okay. How many wasa has Bhante at this time?
It might be.
Because he can't really.
He might take a while
mindfully,
for him to
so sorry,
respond.
Yeah,
okay.
I think he's 3 or 4, something like that.
A little bit. Okay.
Yeah. I knew him a little bit as a layperson. So
I actually see a related question, so maybe we could add these together in the meantime too. He says, it seems like many Western practitioners in the non-duality and some spiritual circles are very focused on stream entry without actually being Buddhist. How does the state of stream entry relate to the larger Buddhist Sangha? So it looks like he's asking about...
So just basically a question about stream entry.
I haven't seen any response.
So practicing generosity is the beginning of the Buddhist path, and then the Buddhist gradual practice in the suttas. Well, there's 2 different suttas, and one it starts with sila, but the other one it starts with dana. It starts with generosity. This is kind of like the very basis of practicing, learning how to let go. Like if you go up to somebody and say, Sabbe Dhamma Anatta. So just let go of all things. Let go of this idea of this permanent self. They're not going to be able to get that, right? You have to start somewhere. So you start with, can you let go of something? Can you give something away without any expectations? Right? Can you practice letting go, even in the smallest way? That's the very, very basic beginning of the practice. And this is something that can be practiced by lay people or monastics, right? You don't have to become a monastic to become a stream enterer. Right? In the suttas, there's many, 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 many lay people who are stream enterers. So if you practice lots of dana and you have some good faith in the triple gem, then even as a layperson, you can become a stream enterer. Now, if you even go further, you practice dana, you practice sila, maybe even practice some bhavana, then you can also get to becoming a stream enterer.
Okay.
Is there any response from the...
I didn't see any response from him, no.
One thing is for monastic, I don't know if the Venerable is asking about for his own practice. But for monastic, it can be a source of concern for some, the desire to practice dana. But monks typically don't have many physical resources to give. We practice contentment with little, of course, and so we do have acts of service typically in our lives. The Vinaya calls for the students to perform many acts of service for their teachers, and it's laid out there in the Vinaya protocols about how to do this. And each one of these is an act of service that can be classified, I think, under dana or chaga, sacrifice, and also the various duties we perform, taking care of the monastery and so on like this. As we become more as we get more years in the robes, then at some point maybe called upon to teach. Quite a serious responsibility, giving the Buddha's teachings, and but it can be very rewarding as well. And it says in the sutras, it's one of the highest blessings, and that the Dhamma is the gift that excels all the gifts. And so we have that to look to when we become more knowledgeable in the path. Dana is one of the 4 or 5 factors of stream entry. We have faith and generosity, sila, and wisdom. And some lists indicate bahu sacha, the great learning as well, which is, some teachers would say you can classify as wisdom as well. But interestingly, it's also these factors also the Buddha talked about with Lady Visakha as factors for being reborn in the heavens also. And so I think these are kind of 2 destinations on the same road, depending on how far you develop these. And they're considered by the Theravada tradition to be prerequisites for developing the Noble Eightfold Path, as prerequisites for Satipatthana. So whenever we perform an act of service, or we practice giving with generosity, or if we find ourselves teaching, for example, a role for monastics, then we're laying the groundwork for developing the Noble Eightfold Path, and directly related to attaining Satipatthana.
Okay. And we have another question. I have a question about practicing samadhi. On one hand, I realize I should cease the mind activities during meditation, but on the other hand, I have the fear that when there is no mind activity, I will no longer exist. Please correct me if this is wrong, or feel free to advise. Thank you.
Well, meditation itself is a mental activity, and I wonder if you mean more simply kind of discursive thinking, and maybe the arising of kilesas, the kind of the negative mental states and emotions, But through the practice of meditation, we'll be putting forth the mental effort to stay with the meditation object, meditation theme, and so it might be a recitation with regard to loving kindness or something like this. And so there can be various kinds of mental activities we do in meditation, and even the initiation of mindfulness itself is a mental activity, because mindfulness is a mental sankhara, and if we're not initiating it, then delusion will come up. This will be another mental sankhara, But if the mind becomes very quiet, and discursive thought, kind of abates, and the mind becomes very quiet, you'll see that there's knowing, and seeing and knowing in the present, and it's quite an alert mental state to be in, and you feel more present, kind of, and awake, and aware, and than ever before. And so you won't have to worry about no longer existing. So you'll feel like you're more alive than ever, kind of thing. So yeah. This kind of this fear, is quite common. We all have. I think many of us, perhaps all of us, have fears with regard to one thing or another. If I lose my job, will my life be over? If my if my loved one passes away, will that be the end of my life? If I lose all of my money, am I finished? These kinds of things. And so it indicates something we have an attachment to, and so we can look at that also and kind of contemplate it. Well, the kinds of mental activities that you typically engage in, they're actually anicca, dukkha, anatta. They're impermanent and constant. They're always changing, and actually they're ultimately unsatisfactory. If we look at the kinds of mental activities we typically engage in, well, have they ever led us to the permanent bliss of nibbana already? They've been perfectly satisfying already. And that which is impermanent and unsatisfactory is really us and ours. And this is the formula from the suttas. We see, well, actually, my mental processes, they aren't really me and mine. It's a way to contemplate and see if this works for you. This kind of investigation, and letting go of them, and the concern about them will go away. we'll feel more at ease, and it'll be easier to focus on our meditation also. Look at it that way as well.
Okay.
I'll cover his other question.
Okay. This also says, how to effectively fight against procrastination in daily life.
Realize that you're going to die. You could die anytime, very soon. This is the thing about procrastination. Well, a couple things. The first thing is try to really reflect on and investigate and understand why you might be procrastinating. What are you procrastinating about and with, right? So do you kind of use your powers of mindfulness and investigation to understand why you are procrastinating? The other is to reflect on things that bring up a sense of urgency. Like this is why the Buddha wants us to reflect on mindfulness of death, right? That, when we go to bed at night, we could reflect that we might not make it. We might not wake up in the morning. We might not make it to the morning. When we wake up, we might reflect. We might not make it till the end of the day. Right? And if you live like with this urgency, with this reality that, life is short. I'm not getting any younger. I don't know how long I'm going to live. That will typically, and if you really live like that, sometimes it takes quite a long time to kind of actually have your mind believe and be trained in this. And if you really live like that, then there's no procrastination. There's triaging. There's like, okay, well, I'm not going to bother with this because there's not enough time in this lifetime. I'm just going to let that go. And I'm going to focus my energy and my efforts on something more important. Right? So there's procrastination, and laziness is never a good thing. It's never approved by the Buddha, except for one time. And that's procrastinating and being lazy and doing bad, evil things. That's the only time you should procrastinate. Don't procrastinate in doing good deeds and in developing the path.
Okay, and they have another question. In Buddhism, can we expect to be remembered and memorized by other people after death, or completely shouldn't? Well, I would say, can we expect to it? It sounds like you say shouldn't. Maybe you mean like, should we expect this or should we hope for this versus can we? I would say can we is that it's possible that people will remember you, if you have family and friends. But should we after death? It's interesting, actually. Some of the oldest record of human, poetry and religious, we have the Rig Veda from India. It's one of the oldest religious texts that exists in human history. And one of the things that they think about is they want to be remembered after death through fame. So they want to do something that will make people remember them. They'll sing poems about them. They'll talk about them. Their name will not die.
Like Achilles.
Yeah.
Things like that. Yeah.
So it's like there's this very ancient idea of like, I may die, but my name will not. I will be remembered. Or maybe they think like I'll have family members and I'll live on through them. And even nowadays, a lot of modern people subscribe to what we might call physicalist annihilationism, or some kind of theory or idea that basically that there is no kind of, that at death, everything with the cessation of the brain, all kind of mental activity ceases, and that's it. And so then maybe they take on other ideas like, well, I'll write a book and I'll be remembered through that, or my works, that's how I'll live on. So they might think like the afterlife is a silly superstition, but we can live on through what we do. And what I would say is that really it's just another way of projecting our kind of self-existence, or it's kind of an expectation to, I want to exist. I don't want to die. Is what it really boils down to. Is we don't want to die. And actually the Buddha is saying that that type of desire will actually shackle you to continued death. Because if we want to exist in some way, like I need to exist, my personality must continue on somehow, then what we're doing is we're attaching and we're trying to project ourselves into the future, even if we think it's not possible. And so the Buddha's teaching is that when we die, the mind will actually, that projection, that desire, that attachment will actually project us into another life where we are bound to die again. And so it actually is kind of this vicious circle of like, we don't want to die, we want to be remembered. And so then we keep putting ourselves into situations where we're afraid of death. And so we try to protect ourselves by being remembered. And then we're reborn again where we need to be afraid of death again. And then we try to be remembered. And so this kind of desire that we be remembered, that we continue some way, somehow, even if we don't believe in an afterlife, that will actually subject us to this kind of mental stress and torment, physical and mental, of not wanting to die, basically. So I wouldn't recommend it personally.
I have a question. Do you even know your great-great-grandparents' names? Do you know what they did in life? Chances are probably no. Right? Do you know your great-grandparents' information? Do you know anything about them? Right? No matter how much you want to be remembered, no matter how much maybe you have children and they really love you and they want to keep your memory alive, eventually you'll be forgotten. And actually, there's quite a peacefulness in this when you let go. Ajahn Brahm has a whole guided meditation about this. About I think it's called gravestone or cemetery meditation or something like this, where you reflect that you will be eventually, nobody will know you even existed. And of course, yes, that's very scary. As a matter of fact, I personally, in analyzing human nature and the mind, I think more people are way more afraid of complete annihilation than death. Like, I think more people are afraid of the idea of after you die, there's nothing. Because there's this deep-seated fear of, in modern Western things, we would say ego death. This deep-seated fear of me disappearing. The deeper your wisdom gets in the Buddhist practice, you realize there's no me to fear disappearing in the first place. So you just are able to let it go. The fear of that goes away. But do reflect on this, that nobody's going to remember you after a certain amount of time anyway. You will be completely and utterly forgotten. Just like all of those, you go to your local graveyard, and you'll see graves from 100 years ago. Anybody visit those graves? No. Right? They're forgotten. You will be forgotten. And yes, that's going to be fearful at first, but if you keep reflecting on that, eventually there'll be peace.
I wonder if I could answer the question from a totally different angle.
Please.
Yeah. That's I think it's great advice. Reflecting on impermanence, and conducive to letting go. There's another way of looking at it, kind of more. That's looking at we might say from like the ultimate reality point of view. If we look at it from a different point of view, from a conventional reality point of view, the practice of remembering and being grateful to our parents and our other relatives and our ancestors, and then engendering these kinds of qualities in our children. And the practice of memorializing them, that is our parents and our ancestors, with offerings and sharing merit. This is quite common in Buddhist cultures. And so while we have to recognize that eventually someday no one will remember us, and that this life is necessarily impermanent, that we also can have gratitude and try to remember those who came before us and all the things they did for us, and as traditional Buddhist culture, to make offerings and to perform other acts of merit, and to share the merit with those who passed on before us, who did so much for us. And then if we teach our children also to do this kind of thing, then it's a very heartwarming practice that they can have. So not only after we pass away will they be thinking that we've passed away, but they'll be thinking of ways that they can repay us, and remembering what we've done for them, and they'll have a practice that they can do to still feel connected and helpful to us, and to show their gratitude. This can be good for them, I think, because oftentimes children grow up and they realize they've missed opportunities to be grateful to their parents, and I know sometimes I've reflected on that, and if we train them to have gratitude and to do things for their parents, then they'll have that satisfaction when they're older. When I had the opportunity, I've done good things for my parents, and feel good about themselves. And so it's another side of it, way of looking at it.
Thank you.
We're at a half hour, so should probably be
Should we maybe go?
mindful of, well, I don't know how many questions there are, but just mindful if there are tons.
Okay. Dear Bhante, when do you think one will benefit from development of the perception of skeleton? Also, how do they usually go about doing this traditionally? Thank you. Maybe I'll just try to do this briefly. Well, the perception of skeleton, there's a couple different ways of approaching it traditionally, but usually it's considered, basically it's a visualization practice. So when it talks about perception, it's really talking about like a mental image. Now, this can include reflecting on an actual skeleton image. So like actually looking at either a real human skeleton or an animal skeleton, or a fake skeleton, like a plastic one. And but the idea is that you're supposed to develop this perception kind of mentally, so you don't need to just look at an external object. So for example, while you're walking throughout the day, you might start remembering, oh, there's a skeleton inside of me. Like my bones, there's an actual skeleton. If I were to peel my skin, there is a literal skeleton in here. It's not just an abstract concept. So we try to develop a real perception that inside of this body, there is a skeleton. Inside of other bodies, there are skeletons, real skeletons, not plastic ones. And then also, maybe in your meditation, you can even visualize just a skeleton. And you can think, just like that skeleton that I see, there's a skeleton in here. And so you can reflect, like just as that skeleton is, so this skeleton also is. And you can also just do it internally. So you could just reflect, like even meditating, for example, you could have your own body visualized, and you could observe your own skeleton or contemplate your own skeleton, developing a perception of it. It could start with recitation and more kind of abstract memory, like thinking there is a skeleton, kind of trying to reflect on that, maybe silently also in the mind, like just kind of observing and trying to, I don't want to say think about it necessarily verbally a lot, but just kind of trying to imagine it, like absorb it emotionally. There's a skeleton. And that can also turn into a real visual perception if you're that type of person or that you have that type of skill. And it can help with visual aids. So that's one of the ways of doing it. And the benefit is contemplating death, contemplating the unattractive nature of the body, contemplating impermanence, letting go of attachment to physical things that are related to the body.
Is this an officially named practice? Like he has it in parentheses, like, or is this just part of body?
In the suttas, it does sometimes get named perception of skeleton. Yeah.
Well, this is Sud again, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, yes. He was asking earlier about the Satipatthana practices. I know in the past, Sud and I have talked about loving kindness meditation. And I think, as he mentioned, also breath meditation, and perhaps. And he asked about when is appropriate, and you answered that as well, I think, about letting go of things related to attachment to the body. And I think Sud is a doctor. So his family is probably quite a busy schedule, and yeah, I think that one is quite common to for lay people to be prescribed the kammatthana of practicing breath meditation, because breath meditation is a meditation style that's appropriate for all personality types, as they say according to tradition. It's very calming, and this is a great meditation object. It's actually the meditation object that the Buddha was practicing, they say, when he attained enlightenment. And loving kindness also would be good meditation practice, help us with our interpersonal relations and to become more, develop emotional intelligence. And so it's a great one as well. And then if we have these two kammatthana already, to practice with and develop, because it takes time to develop these things, then perhaps other meditation styles might be developed more used more tactically. When it comes to attachment with regard to the body, aspects of the body that are repulsive can be attended to or perceived when we're experiencing like attraction, if we're experiencing lust, for example, romantic desires and so on like that. And so taking a moment, if we're experiencing something like that, to perceive a repulsive aspect of the body can help that kind of desire to go away, and then we can attend to things more skillfully. So if we see a form that's attractive, say we see someone who's quite attractive, and we're looking at their face, we notice, just notice, perceive for a moment or two, that actually what we're seeing is only skin deep. As the old saying goes, beauty is only skin deep. If we think about what's behind the skin a little bit, it can help the mind be more balanced. And so that's a common circumstance in which to attend to a repulsive aspect of the body, kind of using it tactically in given situations. Using repulsive aspects of the body as a kamatana, you can kind of run into problems, and there are near enemies for many of the kamatana. I don't know if there is one for breath meditation, I have to admit. For loving kindness meditation, there are near enemies, for example. And for kind of a sustained practice of a kamatana, like the skeleton or the repulsive aspects of the body, I think it's according to tradition, it's useful to have a teacher to check in with and make sure that we're developing it in a balanced way, so so that we use it to an extent that the mind becomes balanced, and not so that we become overly repulsed. Because then we can slip into negative mental states related to aversion. And typically it's prescribed that with repulsive aspects of the body, it's good to practice in relations in a student-teacher relationship where someone can guide
you. Thank you, Ajahn. Norma, following up on a previous question, she says, I meant like starting with body scanning, then breathing, then death or metta, and how to let go with no thought.
I kind of already gave it like a little glimpse into but how to let go with no thought. One of the biggest misconceptions is that you're trying to have a state of no thought. That is not what you're trying to do. You're trying to set the groundwork for your mind to become tranquil. So don't worry about thought in your mind or not. Set the groundwork for your mind to become tranquil. That's by continuing to try to keep your focus on the breath. You get distracted, you come back. You get distracted, you come back. Whether there's thought or not in your mind doesn't matter. Just do your best to stay focused on the breath.
And also, just real quick, Bhante Varapanyo said, I'm 5 Vasa now and 6 Vasa. This year we'll be hosting our Vasa retreat in Bodh Gaya.
Wow. 5. Sadhu Anumotana. It's a landmark, 5 Vasa. No longer what they call a Nawaka Bhikkhu or a new Bhikkhu, but a new monk, but a Majjhima Bhikkhu. You're a middle monk. So congratulations for making that far.
And Lydia says, is breaking a precept to give alcohol as a gift? So is it breaking a precept to give it as a gift?
No. I mean, you're not drinking the alcohol, so it's not a precept. I mean, like the only thing that might come into play is if you were, one of the wrong livelihoods that the Buddha mentions is kind of like creating and selling alcohol, right? So like if you were like making alcohol and selling it, then maybe that would be wrong livelihood, but you're not drinking the alcohol, so it's not breaking the precept. I mean, you might not want to encourage it, but most people, like in regular life, maybe this person is used to getting alcohol as a gift, and you give them what they give you, but that's not breaking precept.
Okay. And Hasanta says, thanks, Bhantes. I find Paticca Samuppada so complicated and can't see how it works with the 5 khandhas. The order is different, and Namarupa doesn't include consciousness, but does include Vedana, but Vedana is in Paticca Samuppada. Maybe what I would say briefly about this, Hasanta, is I would recommend, if you find certain things like this really too much, sometimes it is good to study it in detail if you're at that point. But sometimes it's also good to take it slowly. One of the things that can catch people sometimes is they'll think like, okay, the Buddha taught the 6 senses, he taught the 5 aggregates, he taught the 6 elements and the 18 elements. How do these all fit together? But it's not necessarily about that. It's really about finding, he gave these different models, which for some people are beneficial over others. So for example, there's a sutta where the monks say, that they saw the Dhamma by contemplating the 4 elements. And another one says by contemplating the 6 senses. And another one says they contemplated the 5 aggregates. And another one says they contemplated that everything that's of the nature to arise is bound to cease. And so these different models, they don't need to be intellectually fit together. It's not to say that that's a bad activity or anything, But if you find it difficult, sometimes it can be helpful to work with different models that you find helpful. And then, like, for example, don't worry too much about how does the 5 khandhas relate to dependent origination. Just work on understanding dependent origination. And then work on understanding the 5 aggregates, how you find useful. And then maybe over time, it can start to become more clear and you can start to ask more specific questions. Because really, they're models. They're not... we shouldn't get caught up in the words. They're just ways that the Buddha broke things up so we can help us understand and practice Dhamma.
To understand these deeply, you have to practice. You have to develop your wisdom and insight. You cannot understand things like anatta, things like paticca just by intellectualizing and trying to, read some books from monastics who connect it all together. That's basically, I don't want to say useless information, but it's not information that is going to have a deep impact in your mind because you haven't done the practice to make those connections. Right? When you meditate, you practice anapanasati, you practice Satipatthana, and you start to see things deeply, then the way these things all kind of connect start to become more clear in your mind. But if you're just trying to kind of intellectually understand, your head's gonna explode, as the Buddha says, trying to intellectually understand many things in the Dhamma. You have to put it into practice, and then over years, as you put it into practice and you go back to it, you understand more.
Yeah, I'd like to. I'm inspired to say something on the subject. I know we're kind of short on time, and we may have a number of more questions to go, but I think it's such an important topic. I wonder if I could prevail upon it. Okay, thank you. So hopefully what I say is worth the time. I think one of the things the questioner is talking about, I can't see the name, Asanta, right? Is hit on is that actually the Buddha is talking about similar things in different ways, all within the Paticca as I understand it. So traditionally Paticca the 12 links are understood to span 3 different lifetimes. And so towards the beginning of the 12 steps, we have the previous lifetime to now. And then in the middle, we have the current lifetime. So here in the present moment, even down to how things are working moment by moment. And then the last portion of Paticca Samuppada is about a future lifetime. And if we break it down in this way, we see that actually there's a general pattern, which is that due to having kilesas, we take action and we experience results. And so we have that from the past, with the kilesa being ignorance. In the present, the kilesa being craving. And using the term kilesa meaning defilement. And in the future, is it bhava? Or is it upadana? Maybe it's upadana as the third part. So I'm a forest monk, I have to admit, so sometimes remembering all these details is a little bit difficult. But the general trend is that because we have kilesas, we act on our kilesas, and then we have to experience the results. And so we've been doing this in the past. If we keep doing it now, then we're going to encounter that in the future as well. And so once we understand this general pattern, then we become inspired to, well, how do we put the teachings into practice now to unwind this whole process? And it comes down to our sensory experience and the kilesas that are born from that. And right there, as we put into practice the meditation and so on, as Bhante Jay is talking about, and we unwind the whole process. So that's why if we talk, we do see, for example, Vedana comes at some point in the beginning, and then it shows up again in the middle. That's because the Buddha is talking about at different points in different lifetimes, trying to point out talk about this general pattern in different ways over different lifetimes.
Thank you. Intervals.
And with close to 50 people, we're never going to get all the questions within 2 hours. So it's okay. We'll just do whatever we can.
Yeah, it's always next month chat.
Yeah.
How do I fight against the tendency to teach other people on the things that I am specialized in, especially when it's not needed by others? So wanting to interject with opinions you know about.
Well, that's a great question. Yeah, that's right. We all experience urges, feel the urge to do something or other. for some of us, it's just it's this urge, to state our opinion or to teach or something like this. And other people feel different urges, the urge to drink alcohol, for example, or the urge to to do whatever. And urges sometimes are, they can have benefits. The activity that we feel an urge to act on, it can have a benefit, and sometimes it doesn't. And so, if we want to practice with being mindful, noticing when we experience the urge, and kind of being with the urge mindfully. We might practice with maybe just erring on the side, kind of just not acting on that urge if we notice a pattern that's been problematic for us or for other people, And so maybe just initially having the mindfulness just to notice when it's happening and to have the restraint not to act on it. It's better if we can have the mindfulness about when it's happening and have the discernment to see whether or not it is appropriate to act on the urge or not. But in the very beginning, we may just have to kind of hold ourselves in a bit. And then it is helpful also to have a regular practice, as I was mentioning before, with following precepts and meditating, so that we develop that mindfulness, so it's there for us when we need it. We have a practice with that. That's what I would say.
Okay. Robert has a question. I think I know this, Robert. Not sure if it's the same one, but hello, Robert. How can I keep my sense restraint consistent? I tend to be able to keep it up for a while, but then will indulge in things that I normally don't and take it overboard for a day or two. Ideas.
Develop Satipatthana. If you develop Satipatthana, then you'll have more consistency. But you should also understand that you're not going to be 100% all the time consistent. You're not an arahant, right? You're going to, especially sometimes maybe instead of kind of forcing yourself so much to the point that you break and you end up indulging in unskillful things, maybe you give yourself a little bit of an out with more skillful things, right? Maybe you just kind of see, okay, I'm about to break. Instead of going all the way into totally unskillful, maybe I'll let myself indulge a little bit of somewhat skillful. There's a way of kind of understanding the balance. But in general, if you practice Satipatthana, develop your mindfulness to a very strong point, then you'll have more consistency with sila and sense restraint and all of these things.
One thing is to make it so you don't come across the sensory experience in the first place. Also, it depends on what it is and how practical it is. Depends on what it is. I think what it is you find yourself really tempted to indulge in. I remember when I used to love watching movies in my life. And I would spend too much time watching them sometimes. And so I found that if I simply covered over, whether it was the TV or the computer monitor or something like this, with a cloth, then I didn't see it, and I wasn't so tempted to turn it on. I found that if I didn't do that, if I forgot to do that, or if I didn't for some reason or other, then I was so much more likely to go ahead and turn it on, and I could find myself watching movies or watching TV for long periods of time, and then regretting it afterward. And so, if you can think about what it is you're tempted to indulge in, and see, well, how can I not have sense contact with it? maybe that would help as well.
And Sud says, no Kasina for now. Prairie says, greetings. Do you have any advice on food addiction or craving for food and how to overcome? Well, the Venerable just touched on this a little bit with sense restraint. So if you haven't heard about sense restraint, it was talked about a couple of times now. So you could always re-listen. But for food, it's one of the things that's really very difficult for most people because we have to eat. So like Ajahn was talking about movies or, maybe unnecessary conversations we can avoid to a large extent, but food we can't avoid. And so food addiction and craving for food, even if you're a monk eating one meal a day, that's not stopping you from thinking about food all day. And even if you eat 3 meals a day, that's not stopping you from having no problem with food addiction. Some people, they eat several meals and they're completely fine. Some people, they eat little meals and they're obsessed with food. And so it doesn't always boil down to the amount of food. What I would recommend is you can experiment, especially as a layperson, checking like, okay, what is my actual goal? So if it's a serious food addiction, maybe you're not going to cut out, you're not going to try to starve yourself of all indulgence in food. You can start smaller and just find like, what is my actual goal, and make it reasonable, and just set a reasonable goal for yourself and try that. And then work on other practices around it. Don't just focus on food, but do mindfulness while you're eating, reflect on food when you're not eating, develop your meditation, center your mind a little bit so it has a little bit more inner peace and less willingness to just immediately jump out. And kind of working at it gradually, developing wholesome qualities and gradually reducing the indulgence. But if you just go all at once, like Robert was talking about before, it's very likely you're just going to indulge. You're just going to eat a bunch of food all at once, or you're going to, jump off. But if you have like, okay, I'm going to have these meals, and you set it and you try to work on that reasonably. And at the same time, you're doing other practices and you're developing mindfulness while you're eating. So mindful of the chewing, mindful of the taste, mindful of what you're liking and how pleasant is it really. That's a whole, I don't want to know if there's a lot of time to talk about it in detail. You could also look at mindfulness of eating practices, but that's one of the things that can be helpful, like baby steps and gradual progress, and then practicing mindfulness and sense restraint in daily life also.
Investigate the root. People don't become addicted to drugs and alcohol and sex and games and food for no reason, right? The Buddha even calls us out. When we experience unpleasant experience, we drown it out with pleasant experience. So there's a reason, right, why there's a food addiction. You investigate the root. Put your efforts on finding the reason and investigating the reason and knowing it very deeply. And then the addiction will, in many ways, take care of itself. Of course, this is not an easy nor short process, but that's really the end goal.
I think for addictive behaviors, also you have to evaluate how serious is the addiction, and see, is it really something you can do? You can take care of with these kinds of practices, or should you seek kind of professional help, really? Whether it's a counselor or a support group or something like that. So I'd recommend that as well. Thinking about that quite seriously. If in a short time you don't find you're able to kind of get a handle on it, so to speak, and if you're experiencing, if it's really interfering with your life, then don't hesitate to turn to some kind of professional or experienced help who can work with you in practical ways in your life, to curb these kinds of behaviors also.
Right. Comment. I have another question related to metta. I am trying to practice metta in all aspects of life, when I'm going outside, while walking, etc. What is very hard is to practice this while driving. When someone honks, for example, I find how I can make my mind stronger. Okay, so how can I make my mind stronger when they're in difficult situations? Maybe practice the 4 foundations of mindfulness, and prior to this, so that the mental formation can be identified at the source. Any advice? Lots of metta.
Well, I would say, first thing I would say is probably we have 10 minutes left. Just save your questions. Don't add any more questions. Maybe put it in a little document for next week. But the thing, one of the reasons I would say, because I've actually answered this question multiple times, because the specific thing comes up with driving. When you're driving, the stakes are much higher. So it's much easier for you to get agitated. The stakes are much higher, but meaning somebody's on their phone or they don't pay attention, they swerve, and then people die, right? So things are happening at a faster speed. The consequences of that speed are more dangerous. So even if you have lots of metta while you're walking, if you see somebody putting you in danger or something like that while you're driving, then you're the level of agitation and anger is going to be much higher. So that's something I think that's very important, just as a general rule to understand. Right? It'd be kind of the same thing like if you're soldiers, right? And the somebody screws up means somebody could die, right? So you probably have a lot less metta or a lot less like patience for that person, right? So this is a specific situation when you're driving that you have to be extra mindful about. Because the fact that, somebody does something stupid, cuts you off, doesn't use a blinker, that can cause somebody to die, and does. So you have to be extra mindful in that situation to understand these reasons why your metta might not be as strong while you're driving.
One thing I heard Bhante Sud also say also that I found really insightful is he said you should change your attitude to driving completely. Like start driving slowly, start intentionally letting people over, like be the nice person who you don't want to be in a rush. You don't want to, oh, they cut me off. Just kind of slowly allowing other people to go safely. Because sometimes people drive, they have that attitude. And I heard when Bhante said that, I thought it was very, very insightful.
No, I think that's very good, actually. Very good. Yeah.
Okay, it says, to follow up the question on procrastination, how can I stimulate myself to get up early every day to my morning meditation? To do morning meditation, as I feel morning is the best time, but it's easy to oversleep. Getting up early.
I wonder if morning really is the best time for you to meditate. And you can look into that and think about, perhaps should you meditate at a different time, a time that's more practical for you. Are you oversleeping because you're genuinely tired? This kind of thing. If you find that it's difficult to meditate in the mornings, then maybe pick another time when you're less likely to procrastinate. Abhanteji's advice about contemplating death, I think it was really great. And you can contemplate that. If you could die in your sleep, and so wouldn't it be better to wake up half an hour earlier and meditate? It'd be because that could happen to us, and if we're going to pass away, it'd be better to pass away with mindfulness. But also, on the other hand, if you practice with that for a while and it doesn't get you out of bed early enough, you can say, well, if you meditate, say in the evenings, for example, in the afternoons, this may help you with your mindfulness, and then help you with the procrastination also. And then you may find that you are able to get up in the mornings earlier. So just a different way of looking at it.
And also, you should question yourself, because this is something that I've seen myself try to do for many years. Are you trying to burn the candle on both ends? Meaning, are you trying to stay up as late as possible and then wake up, right? When I decided I wanted to start waking up earlier in lay life to exercise and meditate and stuff like that, I also had to decide that I need to be asleep by this time, so I have my full time of sleep. So be aware, make sure you're having that full, whatever your body needs in terms of the full night of sleep. And then you should be able to wake up with energy.
Rick asks, can you share some reflections on balancing letting go versus maintaining autonomy and control in practice and in our relationships? I am especially interested in how this relates to maintaining healthy boundaries with people, I assume.
What a great question, yeah. One of the it's I think one of the most basic answers is to let go of getting it right, and let go of it when you get it wrong, and let go of the idea of balance also. It's not that we don't want to kind of be in balance and to have healthy boundaries and these kinds of things. It is good to try to have those. But if we start out from the point of view that we don't want to suffer over it when we're not able to accomplish this, and life in general has a way of getting us out of balance. Even if you can get everything perfect, it's bound to be impermanent, and it's going to go out of balance again anyway, in some way or other. And so if you, I think maybe if you simply try to continue using your mindfulness and your discernment, your wisdom, to negotiate every situation in your life, to the best of your ability with mindfulness and discernment within the bounds of your precepts, and you give it a good, honest try, then whether or not someone takes advantage of you, or whether or not you respect your boundaries well enough, and so on like this, you can be satisfied that all along the way you've tried to live in line with these principles, and inevitably you will grow in your wisdom with regard to them, and with regard to your mindfulness as well, and keep your precepts so that you don't commit bad karma, and so you'll do well over time.
I think this last one is probably good for us to end on.
This one here?
No.
Or this one? Oh. Sergio says, Bantes, may I ask what has been the most important practice or technique in your formal meditation?
Well, for me, it's been walking meditation and Satipatthana. Those are the two practices that have really molded my development and my practice. Walking meditation and Satipatthana practice, mindfulness in all activities.
For me, it's hard to say what's been the most important, honestly. It's hard to pin it down like that. To me, it's all kind of, the Buddhist practices, it's all kind of connected. I mean, what I would say is I really found contemplating like sense restraint helpful, but it's not really formal meditation. In terms of formal meditation, it's kind of metta and mindfulness of breathing are main things. I mean, sometimes kind of depends. So it's hard for me to answer what's been the most important in my formal meditation personally in that way. Well, John, did you have?
I think maybe it's funny when I hear these questions. I see someone asks, what has been most important to you, and I wonder, one of the things that crosses my mind is why are you asking me, in the sense of how do you evaluate the answer in relation to me on your end? On the one hand. On the other hand, what difference does it make to you what was useful for me? And so, but so I'm teasing a little bit. I hope you don't take it too personally. I'm not trying to criticize your question too much, but some of these things do cross my mind sometimes. And so I thought, well, what is an answer that's maybe useful to others about my own practice? And if we take a step back and not talk specifically so much about meditation, but talk about a quality in general. And there's the quality of heedfulness, which the Buddha talked about, for example, in the Dhammapada, that heedfulness is the path to the deathless. And it's more the general quality of always trying to be applying appropriate attention to how do I really advance spiritually, and how do I do the right thing, and not to slip into laziness, as Bhante Jay was talking about before, not slip into laziness and not slip into idleness, and not be distracted by things that aren't useful, but to stay on course, whether it's trying to develop ourselves in precepts, or to develop ourselves in generosity, or in meditation. And so maybe that's what I think has been most important to me, and is a very important fundamental quality.
Thank you, Venerables. And it looks like we are just close out of time here, and we almost finished all the questions also. So should we close up?
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll just say thank you to everybody for your questions. And if you have any more that didn't get answered, you can feel free to bring them to next monk chat. And thank you, Venerable Boypunya and Venerable Jayaswara, for answering here. If you are more interested in what's going on here, you can check out our YouTube channel and find other weekly streams that are done for sutta studies, and also for monastics in Thailand and Sri Lanka. So for more Dhamma during the week, feel free to join in for that.
You also have, I think, I don't know if you want to talk about your live stream tomorrow, Bhante Jay, but this is the in-person teaching events here at the monastery. Also, there's a program tomorrow night, it's Saturday night, and it starts at, please remind me, 6 o'clock, Bhante Jay?
Yeah, 6 o'clock.
6 o'clock here at Empty Cloud, meditation, guided meditation, and the talk and Q&A. And then Sunday afternoon at 1, from 1 to 3, we have 1 to 4. Sorry, that's good. It's a good long one here. That's a great afternoon, 1 to 4 of meditation and talk and Q&A again. And so 2 great opportunities there. They happen every weekend here at Empty Cloud.
Yeah. So feel free to join the monastery for these events if you're in the area. And have a good rest of your weekend, everybody. Sukhiyoto.